Trina, it's great to have you with me. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, so we want to hear about your own story of awakening to wellness, spirituality, personal development. Was that kind of part of your growing up years, or is that new for you at some point in life?
Great question. For me, I've always been an empath and been a highly sensitive kind of child and, sensitive to energy, sensitive to animals, moods, people. And it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I realized that not everyone had the energies that I had, which was like part of the awakening. So I would say my big awakening kind of occurred about 30 years ago. And I was visiting a friend in Montana who was a high school friend and just went to see her for the weekend. And during that time, we went to kind of a metaphysical store. And at this time, I'm working at General Motors. I'm wearing the blue suit. Like I'm in a leadership position. Like this isn't part of my realm. And so we go there and she offered to buy me this reading. And I was like, what's that? And so this lady said, I can't because I'm doing a past life regression. And I'm like, what's that? And she said, oh, I go in and help clear out stuff with people. And I was like, I got stuff. So this lady who was just lovely, her name's Val Ann. I'm hoping she's still on the planet. She came in on a Sunday, which was Easter Sunday, and led me through a past life regression. And it just awakened my world like something out of a movie. So I was able to see every family member and see their auric color. And I was able to see my sweet, I had this amazing German grandpa that I loved dearly who had passed. And he had this pocket watch, this Elgin pocket watch that got put in his pocket before they closed the casket. And he showed up in this vision. And he had this pocket watch and he's like going like this. And he's all filled with white energy. And he's showing me that there's a pawn shop in Missoula that has this watch. And so I leave, after this big long session, drive 8 hours back to Seattle where I was living at the time and had all these memories and things come through and just was like, what just happened? So about 4 months later, I was visiting this friend and her family again. And we were walking through this farmer's market and I saw this pawn shop that was lit up. Like I see things have extra energy. So it was lit up. And we go inside there and there are no watches whatsoever other than this Elgin pocket watch. And so I had to step outside because it was so overwhelming of what just happened, take a deep breath and went back in and said, please don't be expensive. And I have this pocket watch on my altar to this day. And it just was this reminder and this opening that life is way more magical and connected and spiritual than we ever thought it to be. And so from that, it kind of led me down a path of just curiosity. And, honoring the gifts that I saw and seeing what showed up and connecting dots in ways that I had never connected them prior to that.
And so did you begin as you're exploring, how did you kind of unpack those things? How did you add to that experience? Was it particular teachers or courses that you took or just more spiritual encounters? What was that path like?
Yeah, great question. I think I think at that time I was just more aware when it came across my path. So I started there was a really good bookstore. It's since closed down called East West. That was in Seattle that I really appreciated. So I'd go in there if they had someone talking or something going on. I would say one other kind of thread that led me to kind of that curiosity was at around that timeline. I had this cat that I'd named Ernie after my grandfather. And the cat had told me it was time to go. And it was just this beautiful, amazing friend for 16 years. And so there's this tree up in the San Juan Islands, this big Madrona tree with this broken arm that would call me like twice a year. I would just get this intuitive hit to come out. So I would jump on a 4 a.m. ferry and go hang out and sit and meditate by this tree. So I went to take Ernie out to this tree and put his ashes out there. And when I got out there and I was starting to spread his ashes. Sorry, I have this poem that came in that I wanted to read and I shut off my phone. So I just got to grab it real quick. I had this poem that came through and it came in through so fast that I grabbed a pen basically from my purse and I wrote it on the cardboard box that Ernie's ashes were contained in. And this is what kind of led me to the awakening, because it was such a concrete experience that channeling too. So I just want to bring this in real quick. So the poem that came in, and I'm just going to read it. We spend all of our lives building ourselves into something that we spend the final moments of our lives shedding. And in that hour of awakening, with purity in our soul, we ask ourselves, what took us so long? And as our ashes blow softly in the wind and through the trees, we breathe our last moment and welcome ourselves home.
Mm.
And that came in. I'd always written poetry and just thought about it, but that came in was like not crossing anything out. It was a channel. And it stuck in my system in the sense of like, how am I not being authentic to myself? If I left the world tomorrow, have I lived my soul's mission? Have I lived my truth? And so I started from those two kind of experiences, started just exploring. So I became a Reiki Master. There's an amazing teacher who's a medical intuitive named Marie Manucheri, based out of Kirkland, who I became a Reiki Master, and I was able to see and feel and experience energies on bodies very quickly. And I just started to kind of like go to these workshops, go to things, just stay curious. And so I started clearing and working with friends, but I was kind of like hiding in my corporate world too. And I had a kind of shift from corporate to nonprofit from a beautiful mother figure who had left the world from cancer, had a brain tumor, and I had a profound conversation with her. And she gave me all her regrets, and I said, I'll do them all. I'll do them. And I, a couple of weeks later, had it already scheduled climbing Kilimanjaro. And so I was climbing and started at, 10,000. We're going to 19,304. And we're just going slowly. And the porters are singing in Swahili and the stars are out. And Charlie was her name. And she came in. And I was like, what am I doing pushing cars down the road when I just watched someone die at 57? And so I came back and got my master's in nonprofit leadership and started working in with nonprofits and mostly at-risk youth, disadvantaged youth. And then really saw that it was time for me to step into my true soul's work. So I'm going to say that your soul's work is your embodiment. So it doesn't have to be. So I was still doing that when I was, finance for dealerships sort of thing. But that's when I really saw that I could help more people on the path quicker.
Mm-hmm. And so if someone meets you today and says, who are you? What do you do? You've obviously had, like myself, kind of that winding path of getting to do all sorts of different things. Who would you say you are today and what you offer the world?
Yeah, great question. I like to describe myself as a multidimensional being. So I think like I have many talents and many things that I love to do and many things that bring me joy. In regards to the work that I do, I describe it as transformative alchemy. I like to take dense energy and move it into a higher frequency. And I'm an intuitive guide. I'm certified as a life coach, so that's definitely part of it. But the work that's done is a lot of using the clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient skills and accessing and bringing that client's energy in and helping them get to their highest potential. So some friends have said, or some clients have said like, oh, you're a soul whisperer, you're a channeler, you're a medium, you're this, but it's all that and more.
Mm-hmm. So when you say transformative alchemy, you just said you take dense energy and say that phrase again.
Yeah. And transform it into the highest frequency or the highest timeline. So when I get clients in front of me, let me go back a little bit if it's okay to kind of explain how I work.
Yeah.
So what I do when I get a client's session, so I had a couple this week, I meditate prior. So I get my frequency as high as possible and work with a large team of angelic beings and my higher soul. And then I call in their energy and I ask to see if you'll experience everything that's going on with them. So I just sit there and take notes. My eyes usually are closed. It's hard to read my writing, but I just take information and I'm asked how to work with them. Sometimes I'm shown questions to specifically ask them to bring stuff up. Oftentimes people that have passed on pop in And it's not to be like, hey, hi, I'm here. It's more to be like, make sure their perspective shifts because it's one way right now and there's a whole other situation that was happening. So then I get the client in front of me via Zoom or in person, and we just go through these things and talk about them. And during the session, I'm able to intuitively also see more ways of things that need to come up. So how I see it is, we have, in shamanic terms, our soul oftentimes fragments out when we have traumatic moments. So it could be, your parents are divorced as a kid or something traumatic happens, or it could be something smaller than that, but that's a trigger in our system. I call our body our system, where we just like, too much, I'm out. And so those timelines or ages kind of drive our bus of life. And our perspective is from, that 8-year-old when your parents got divorced and your dad said this or your mom did this. And so I like to bring those pieces back into the body, back into the soul spirit to get them healed, along with, in most cases, cutting cords of energy that allow them to be in their own sovereign field of light and connect to source and the highest frequency. And so we do a lot of talking in the beginning, and then I put them on the table and I open up their channels, and I'm able to see energy within their field and what it's connected to. I can do psychic surgery on specific things in their body. I don't like to, because everyone is their own healer. And so I usually go through it with them and help remove it and get the lesson so it doesn't come back.
So if somebody is not familiar with what you're talking about, because you just went deep.
Sorry.
No, that was great. That was amazing. But somebody who's going, oh, I thought I was looking for a life coach. Like,
that's what my dad says. He was like, aren't you a life coach? I'm like, oh, you have no idea.
I thought I was looking for some advice. Like, like, how do you introduce this in language that someone who, you just meet and they go, what do you do? And, soul whisper, obviously that's very interesting. But for those who are listening, who are also in this work, what suggestion would you give to them in terms of how to introduce this to somebody who's completely new to this world?
Yeah, great question. What I like to say when I have someone in front of me is that it's already I look out here quite a bit. I get a lot of information from the right side. So I tell them, I'm like, I can have eye contact. Actually, I enjoy eye contact, but I get information and I say, take everything with a grain of salt. Whatever resonates for your spirit is what you're supposed to receive right now. When I'm shown in the prior meditation on how to work with them, sometimes I'm shown like they're not open to this whatsoever. Their friend said, you got to go see my friend, book a session, sort of energy. I'm mostly referral based is how I work currently. And so it's always like, I don't know. They just said they changed their whole world. And so I'm here. And so I bring it to it's not a frequency, but I bring it to a level that they can digest.
Yes.
Because, as we know, in just leadership, it's motivating, getting people to a level that they can digest. It's not the fire hose situation. So what I like to say is that how I work and how most individuals who are intuitive, we're just mirrors. We're just able to see energy, help organize it and bring it back. And so you can receive it in, but we're able to hold a high frequency. And if you can match and see that you can change within that frequency, then anything is possible.
Mm-hmm. Does that make new friendships for you difficult, or relationships where people are kind of freaked out by you? Like, oh my God, is she always like looking at my internal world?
Yeah. So, that's a hilarious and funny and accurate question. I just went to a dinner party a week ago and knew the couple having it, but it was all new people. And I do have the ability to shut things off. So I do have the ability to be like, hey, let me just be at a dinner party.
Right.
What happened was the opposite, that a person's grandfather came in. I was shown very clearly a traumatic situation. They're moving from this country to another country. And this this grandfather who had passed on was just so loud that there was an access point to this individual that I said, hey, actually, I just have to ask you a couple things. And it was this crazy scenario of being shot as a kid and all kinds of stuff that came out. The reason that I made the pact with spirit a long time ago to never hold back anything of what I'm shown and told is I had a neighbor when I lived in Seattle who I knew something was off, but I couldn't figure it out. And he ended up taking his life. And I know that I don't know if I could have saved him. That's not my role, but I know that I could have had a conversation with him. So in regards to the question about are people freaked out or whatever, just because I see everything doesn't mean I say everything. But if I get invited in, then I would share for sure. And no, I'm fun. People love me. And the people that don't love me, I'm just not for them. And that's okay because I love myself.
Of course, yes. I think that one of the things you just mentioned that I kind of am navigating myself because although I have believed in many of the things that you're talked about at different levels and different seasons of life, I'm stepping personally into some of these things in a new way. And as I have these insights or information, sometimes it can feel a bit intrusive to the individual. It's like how to navigate that question of, hey, I just kind of had a sense of something. Would you be open to?
Yeah.
How do you say that to test the
Okay.
waters of someone's openness?
Okay, that's a great question. So let me give a quick example of that. I have my executive master's in nonprofit leadership, ran nonprofits in Africa and the United States. And I was at a conference where a donor paid for me to be at this leadership conference. And it was pretty intimate, but there was one lady, a couple of people that they were never in the same group. It's the last day. And I saw very clearly in her field, in her energy field, some thyroid, I don't want to say cancer, but there was something that it was pretty not great energy, high density. And I'm like, oh, geez, how do you go up to someone after a week together and say like, hey, we never talked, but you got this. And so, but I made that pact with spirit to say like, so I went up to her and I said, hey, we never got to talk. I loved what you shared here. It was so nice to have you in this, cohesive group, but I feel bad that we never had a moment. And I said, I just want to know, if you're open and take everything once again with a grain of salt, but have you got checked for thyroid or have you done anything with that? And she's like, no. And I said, I see something in your field that might just be good for you to check out. Mm-hmm. And so I don't make it like, hey, you're dying of cancer, go tomorrow, but more just, here's something. And I don't want to say this. It's not that I have a gift that everyone else doesn't. I've just honed my intuitiveness in and I trust it because when I don't trust it, I get my rear kicked bad. And so
how does that come back to you if you don't trust it or don't kind of deliver that thought, that message, that intuitive, like what happens in your own life?
Oh gosh. Just oh gosh. That's probably a whole other podcast and probably a couple novels. But what happens is I just get in situations that are not good. So let me just give you a quick example of trusting that. Mm-hmm. I bought a loft in Seattle and I was going to Italy with a group of friends. I was photographing their wedding. I did photography also. And it was two couples and me and this other guy that I was dating. And we ended up splitting right before that. And I was like, I don't want to go to Florence for Tuscany, the most romantic place I think on the planet, or one of them, for this 3-week period. I'll just go for the last 5 days and just document the wedding. So I'm like, where do I want to go? And I've been called to, I got really clear. You're supposed to be in Cape Town. You're supposed to put your feet on the ground there. So I'm like, okay. So I change my miles. I go to Cape Town and I get there. I'm just exhausted. I'm staying at this guest house and they say at the waterfront, but they're like, whatever you do not walk down there. And they're like, okay, cool. I've traveled the world. I've got probably 75 countries under my belt at this point. I'm mostly independent, mostly, developing countries. So I'm pretty in tune, never had an issue. So I go take a nap. I wake up like a day later. I've never slept like this before, but my system was just exhausted from all the change and the breakup and whatever. So I just start walking, and I'm like kind of still waking up, and I'm hungry. So I just start walking down, and it's right there. You could see the waterfront. And I'm just like, kind of just like not even thinking, walking, looking down. And all of a sudden my gut goes, ooh, and I go, and I look straight up, and I see two guys coming at me. And on both sides of the road, there's abandoned buildings. They're burned down. And I instantly saw that if I basically just saw that if I ran, I'd never make it back up. I'd be rape killed. If I went across the street, I'd, rape killed. And so I just looked straight at them and walked straight at them and said, "Good morning." And they, didn't know they were just like, and my heart, my body was going, like my chest was just like, bop, bop, bop. It was one of the scariest moments. It was the only scary moment that I've had in all of my travels, that, this is one of the ways I check out of life. And so if I wouldn't acknowledge that, and if I wouldn't acknowledge the slideshow that I got shown really quick on the best way to handle it, I'd be dead in 2 seconds. So it's like, that's an extreme case, but it's mostly, if I don't honor what I'm being shown intuitively, it just leads to a whole bunch of lessons, we'll say.
Yeah. So you talked about helping people through these traumatic experiences, and you talked about pieces of them being brought back into them and then healed. I know I'm not quite getting that exactly right,
Perfect.
but one of the things that seems to happen in that process is the people that have perhaps caused that traumatic experience, or we've experienced that with, have been somebody that we loved or somebody that we trusted. And so how do you help someone then navigate how to either still be in a relationship with that person, or set boundaries with that person, or stand up for yourself? How do you help them navigate those existing relationships that have had traumatic components to them in the past?
Definitely. So what I would say first is that I also get them to remember that they're souls having a human experience. And sometimes these situations, even though traumatic beyond traumatic, when we look at this, at the end of our life and look back, they're blips on our radar screen of life. And in that sense, there's that quote, or that saying of like, you are the sky, everything else is just the weather. So it's not that I diminish what happens to them, but I bring it into perspective that they are source, they are God, they are the universe within inside themselves first. And so when they have this boundary, or this betrayal, or this disappointment, whatever the term is that's connected to what happened, that when they remember that they are whole within themselves, it's easier to define what is acceptable and what's not acceptable behavior. And sometimes, if it's not in alignment when they're going through that healing process, it's okay to take breaks in friendships and family members and relationships and everything. Because, back to that oxygen mask first sort of energy, if you're not in a space to be in relation with someone, it doesn't mean you can't love them from afar. And it doesn't mean if they didn't call you and said, "I need this," you wouldn't be there. But you get to choose who has your energy or not. And so part of that comes down to just knowing what feels right and what doesn't feel right, and honoring that intuitive part of you. When you leave being with that person, are you exhausted? Or are you lit up? Are you clearing your energy field every time you have any exchange? Because everything's energy. And so there's practical tools that I help get into place with them, along with just letting it be okay to not, be in communication for a little bit, and clarifying that. And I also, I think I mentioned this briefly, but we do cut a lot of cords of energy that I see entangled within people's systems. And when that occurs, there is this belief system that when you heal yourself, you heal 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. And when I do this specific type of protocol, when I call in the 7 generations that have passed, they're there in 2 seconds to come in. Like they want us that are embodied right now to clear the generational traumas. It clears it for them. It helps the earth heal. And so sometimes you have to, remember that whole saying of drinking the poison and expecting your enemy to die is just really hurting you. So there's a forgiveness process that goes in there too. And just seeing that everyone has their own human experience that caused trauma, and it doesn't discount or forget what happened, but you can forgive and make creative space so you can heal.
In that process, as people are healing, setting appropriate boundaries, I know for me in my times of healing, there's can be a sense of obviously rawness, right? You can just feel raw, like, oh my gosh. And that
Yeah.
can, all these triggers can come out. And it, at least for me, has diminished confidence in those seasons of either taking risks or saying yes, or I kind of want to sometimes just curl up in a ball as that healing process is happening.
Yeah.
How do you help people cultivate that sense of confidence again?
I think it's important for people to ask and say what they need. And I think that leads to confidence. So, for example, I had a client earlier this week, who has lots of trauma. And the first sessions are pretty intense, and it was too intense too fast. She had so much buried that the moment she sat down in front of me, it was really sweet. The moment she sat down in front of me, she's bawling. And because it's so stuffed within her system. And so she's like, and I'm like, hey, let's do a pause. So do you want to take a break and we can come back in a week or so and you just go and do some self-care and just take care and work on your nervous system? I will clear you in this timeline in between. And she's like, yes. So, that to me was an example of asking for what you need in that authentic truth to your soul. So what I say and what I do is I'll put my hand on my chest, and I always say my hand on my womb space, and kind of, close my eyes every morning and just breathe and ask my spirit, my soul, my being, what do you need today? And some days you might be having lunch with a friend and be like, nope, you need to be taking a bath and writing in your journal and cleaning or writing a blog post, whatever the thing is. And I honor that. I say, hey, friend, can we schedule to a different day? Actually, I'm feeling this is what I need today. No one's going to argue with what you need when you start asking for it. Usually what that confidence kind of derailing is people forget to ask for what they truly need, because there's a piece of them that doesn't feel they're deserving of it.
How do people navigate that, asking for what they need? Like you talked about, okay, today I want to take a bath, I want to write in a journal, I want to write a blog post. Now I got a 40-hour a week, 50-hour a week job. Like my boss does not care about self-care. They care about the bottom line. Like,
Yeah,
how do I navigate that process of healing when I have all these responsibilities, kids, job?
totally. Well, I think a couple things. I think there's ways to do that within that, 40-hour work week timeline, and baby steps is better than no steps at all. So even just looking at where are you not in cohesiveness within your system during your work week? Where are you not being authentic to what you need? So let me just give a quick example of that. I had a client who had a colleague who lost a parent and was devastated. And that colleague, and it was a pretty high up company where it's not really emotional based, we'll say, as much as others. And that colleague didn't know what to say, was so uncomfortable with that feeling of what the other person was going through. It was just like, yeah, I don't know what to say. And what they did instead is they internalized that. Mm-hmm. So they were starting to not feel grounded within themselves because they missed an opportunity to be authentic to, like, someone's in pain and I need to acknowledge that sort of thing. And so we worked with, like, where's a way that you can have that conversation? And so we practiced, and the person ran into the colleague again and said, hey, how are you? I'm really sorry to hear about your mom. How are you? And they had this really human soul connection that they never would have had if she wouldn't have taken the time and the space. And so when I'm saying like that self-care energy of authentic and being clear to who you are, when she wasn't clear, it upset her whole kind of day because she kept being like, why didn't I do that? Okay, my family didn't talk about emotions. I'm still doing it at work. Okay. And I'm like, you don't have to change everything and go have a powwow with your family overnight, but you can start with what's ever in front of you. And that's the gift of being, a soul in this human experience. We get opportunities every moment to practice being connected and, living through the heart and living with love. And the more we do that, the easier it is to then say to your boss, hey, actually, I'm going to work through this project. I'm going to get it done. I need to take like an hour and leave early today. And they're going to be like, okay. I mean, I've been a boss of many, and like, I'm always going to honor what feels in alignment to that soul if it's good communication. So part of that confidence, part of those things is just learning how to not compartmentalize, because I think that's where we've gone wrong. That's where I went wrong. Like when we take it and take all these emotions and put them over here and do this, that's where you unravel fast. I think it's more with having that opportunity to be embodied and working on that embodiment. Then you go through life and it doesn't matter if it's work, kids, spouse, whatever. You're able to communicate your needs, even if it's like, hey, I need a 10-minute break. I'm going to go outside and hang with the dog. So healing doesn't have to be, I'm going to go sit in an ashram for 3 months.
Sure.
Healing is every day.
You use that term embodiment, which is really pervasive, ubiquitous in terms of the community of healers and so forth. Help me understand that from your perspective. What does that mean, and why is that important?
Yeah. So I think that's a great question. And this is my own journey with embodiment. I could have all the, buzzword bingos of enlightenment and spiritual stuff like no tomorrow. But if I'm not practicing what I preach, then it doesn't mean anything. So, and it's not authentic. And so embodiment to me feels like I'm walking the path of what I'm trying to bring to the planet. And if I'm not healing myself in the process, how can I help anyone else? And so I think what that means is that we're all imperfectly perfect and doing the best we can. And the more we're helping others with those tools while staying true to ourselves, that to me is kind of embodiment. And what does that look like? I think it looks like authenticity. I think it looks like speaking your truth. I think it looks like feeling your emotions. I think it looks like taking time for a timeout if you need it. And I think that's what embodiment is. I think it's looking at your, I call them opportunities. They would be most likely called challenges. Looking at your life and what are the lessons and how can you get that lesson and go check and not bring them forth again and not manifest them in another person. So embodiment to me is kind of walking the talk.
Mm-hmm. So as people are healing with you, they're developing the sense of ability to navigate the relationships with people that have perhaps hurt them, been in these challenging situations. They're developing their confidence. How do you help them then dream again? Like, hey, and it doesn't have to be a big dream. Like I'm going to start this nonprofit or I'm going to start this business. It could just be sometimes when we're so, like I said, raw, it could be small dreams, so
Right.
How do you help them navigate that?
So that's really fun for me. That's actually one of the things that I love everything that I do and the gifts that I've been given to help humanity heal and the planet. But that is really fun for me because I feel strongly that if everyone was doing what lit them up, the world would be heaven on earth in 2 seconds. So when I'm talking to someone and when I'm in a session with someone, if they say something and I see their frequency change with a spark, then I'm like, boop, pull that out and we bring that in. And sometimes that actually even helps the healing faster because, you can't, if your cup is filled with mud and dirt, we have to remove some stuff to be able to receive. But the moment you even get a little bit of clarity in that water, in that soul, then you get all these intuitive hits and creative ideas and all the things that you dreamt of that you stopped doing for whatever reason. So for me, they're intertwined, but I have been seeing lately that there's a whole other part of the journey of how I work with clients that's going to be also connected to their, I call it soulpreneur alchemy, like what's your soul's mission? What lights you up? And really talking about that. And then we could pull out what's stopping you. And that's usually a thread here because, oh, my dad said this when I was a kid, or my mom did this, or some teacher said I couldn't. And you're like, and that's the one thing I could feel myself getting lit up around it. I am the biggest cheerleader for people. I mean, I've never been a cheerleader. I was always athletic, but one of my purposes of being on the planet is shining so bright that you see how, magical you are as a soul. And you can not wait till your deathbed. In that poem that came in when Ernie passed, of like stepping into your highest frequency. So in sessions, there is a kind of it's not a meditation, but it's a journeying of sorts that I bring clients through where we step them into that feeling. And once they have that in their field, it's way easier for the universe to God source to align everything that can get them there faster.
Who are the people that you find are most attracted to you in terms of working with you? Is there a certain demographic or group of individuals that are most resonating with your work?
That's a great question. It's kind of all over the board. I think how that works is tragically or sadly, I've had all the things that could happen to an individual happen in my lifetime. I've had all the not awesome check boxes. And so because of that, what happens when you heal these traumas that your soul chose in this lifetime, you are able to have the keys, codes, activations within your system to heal others. And so I attract individuals who have had a trauma in some cases, or who have buried a trauma, or it's in a certain dynamic in the lineage of family that can see that I have something. It's subconscious. It's not a conscious. It's not like, hey, what do you got? It's more like, what's happening? So I would say I attract individuals that it's not necessarily baby awakeners, but it's people that know that there's way more to life than what they've experienced thus far. And they're ready to look I'm going to say shame. Not sometimes, always when we have anything traumatic, it shows up in us as shame, even though it's done to us in most cases. It's shame. So I help them release that shame. So it's usually clients, it's men and women. It's not just females. It's all genders, and that are just ready for a bigger life, ready to step into their highest blueprint, ready to stop what I call it is wearing a kindergarten coat of trauma, but it feels so comfortable they don't want to get it off, but it also is suffocating them. And when they're ready to have that removed, then they show up.
And when people are working with you, you tend to, do you have like packages like, hey, I want to work with you for like 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks? What's kind of the container that you invite them into?
Yeah, it varies. I would say, 90 days is usually a big change for people, but I sometimes make that in a 45-day. So if they want to do sessions every week, I clear every week, clear energy every week, no matter who I'm working with and whatever that container is. Yeah. And some people are like, cool, let's do that and let me go do my work. And others are like, help, and need a little bit more hand holding. All is good. I do one-off sessions too. What I have seen, and basically from the client this week, is that I think it's best not to do I'm going to say the one-hit wonder of go in and roto-rooter everything out. I think what's happening now on this beautiful planet that we're on is we're getting so much awakening frequency energy so fast that it's overwhelming. And so I think that having sessions broken out in longer ways can peel back layers. The reason I had been in the past doing these kind of like 3 to 4 hour go deep sessions was because my mother, who left the world about 4 or 5 years ago, she died with all her trauma. And so I kind of made a pact with her. She's actually a really good friend on the other side. I made a pact with her that if I get someone in front of me in session kind of ways, that I want to go as deep and as fast as I can. But I also realize that people's nervous systems are too heightened to receive. And so it comes in, but it can come in a more concrete way.
Okay, so 45 to 90 days, depending on what someone said, or depending on what they need. I heard you say that you clear people each week. What does that mean? How do you do that? What's the benefit of that?
Oh, gosh. Well, the benefit is tremendous because until people are so like, that's a funny word. The words that's coming in is professional, which is not it, but are so professional in their own clearing of their field. I have the ability they're not in front of me. It's just their energy. So I sit down every morning, I get my frequency as high as possible, and I call on their energy and I go through their system and I'm able to clear energy. I'm able to clear subconscious patterns. I'm able to clear energies that's not theirs. What I teach and what I will always preach until I leave body is it's so important in kind of energy 101, especially how the world is right now, to clear your energy through any interaction. So you walk into a grocery store. I, would leave that. I say to myself, I call back all my energy, blessed and transformed, and I release any energy that is not mine and send it back to source, God, blessed and transformed. Because what happens is, because everything is energy, you could walk into a restaurant and a couple have just had a huge fight and are getting divorced, and you walk through that, that's in you. Every interaction is an exchange of energy. And if you don't clear it and become a sovereign being of your own light, of your own source, God source energy, you get very convoluted very fast. So I'm able to, with the clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, whatever the clairs, I'm able to bring in people's energy and just see it and feel it and clear it out through the kind of quantum field.
All right. So if someone wants to work with you, which after this, I don't know how somebody would. Yeah, you have such a grounded, wise, like, yeah, this is just how I help people. This is how it happens. I mean, it's just so real. It's so powerful. How
Thank
can
you.
they connect with you? How can they work with you?
Yeah, perfect. I would say probably my website or through Instagram. So either way, so my website's trinagadsden.com. Gadsden spelled funny, but I'm sure it's part of the post. And, or, just email hello@trinagadsden.com, and they can see all the different ways to work with me. And we could, come up with a plan that works best for them. For sure. Either just healing or clearing energy on its own, or going into session in a big container and just really diving into what they want to release.
And you mentioned your Instagram is Trina Gadsden, and I would tell everyone you should definitely go check the most amazing, adorable pictures of Trina and her dad
Yeah.
together. Amazing smiles. As someone who has white hair, I love his white hair.
Oh, no. Oh, I got white hair too. Yeah, I love my dad. My dad is like one of my biggest teachers on this planet because he is a joyful, happy soul, curious. He's going to be 87. And like we get on the phone or we do road trips or we do anything together and we just laugh. And it reminds me of how precious present moment awareness and joy of life is.
Beautiful, beautiful. TrinaGadsden.com, Transformative Alchemy. Really encourage you to check out her website and her Instagram. And you have a podcast. But no, you don't have a podcast. You're a potential podcast guest. I'm looking on your website.
Yeah.
So, of course, if you have
This
enjoyed our
one.
conversation with Trina, invite her to be a part of your podcast and go deeper on any of these topics. So, Trina, it is great to be with you and look forward to connecting with you in the future.
Thank you so much for your time and your love.